我が魂を揺らす大いなる力、この身に宿るか闇を引き裂く新たな光となれ。ペンデュラム召喚、出現せよ私のモンスターたちを。 DDD シーローヘルアーマゲドン。
Hey guys, welcome back to Team 6K. This is Undead, and today we're going to be talking about DDD. Before we get into the video though, be sure to go ahead and check out our last video. Also make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that bell to make sure you get notified every time we make a new video. And check out our socials. We're trying to grow there while we are growing here on YouTube. So how exactly does this deck work? This version of the deck focuses around their boss monster DDD Doom King Armageddon. Technically speaking, its effects are not that useful. We only really use it because the skill requires it. Command of the Doom King. At the beginning of the duel, add pendulum zones to your field. The following effect can be used once per duel. Select a DDD Doom King Armageddon from your hand and add it to your extra deck face up. Then select a DD Pendulum monster from your field and deck respectively and place it, or them, to your pendulum zones. Then negate the effect of these cards until the end of your next turn. The skill can only activate and be used if you begin the duel with a deck, excluding extra deck, that contains at least 5 DDD Pendulum monsters. The fact that it negates the Pendulum scales isn't actually that big of a deal, because one of the downsides of the Pendulum scales is that during your standby phase, the high scales reduce their scales, and the low scales increase their scale numbers, making it more difficult for you to Pendulum summon on the follow-up. But the fact that they're negated until the end of your next turn means you're not going to have to worry about that downside, because that effect will be negated. The thing that can't be negated though is they also have the condition in the scale that says you cannot pendulum summon monsters except DD monsters, and then it says that this effect cannot be negated. So even the skill can't negate the fact that you can only pendulum summon DD monsters. So pretty much the only monsters in the deck are going to be DDDs. But you see, I've got an artifact Lancia in here. Why do I have Lancia in here if I can only pendulum summon DDDs? Well, I'm not trying to summon Lancia. Like, nobody's trying to summon Lancia, but I did want to have a little bit of a segue here. You see, DDD decks tend to play one copy of Card of the Soul. It's a normal spell that looks at your deck, and if you do, you can add one monster from deck to hand whose sum of attack and defense equals your life points, and you can only activate one per turn. So the fact that you can only use it once per turn, and the fact that it isn't going to be as good on the follow-up turns because you might have lost life points, means that people are going to play one copy. But you could definitely play more if you wanted to see the searchable cards more. But of course, at the beginning of the duel, you're going to have 4,000 life points. So if you add a monster's attack and defense together, and it equals 4,000, then you can search for it with Card of the Soul. The reason they play it is for DDD Doom King Armageddon, who has 3,000 attack and 1,000 defense. Fun fact about Doom King, he's actually a Hollywood actor. You know, he actually played one of the Cromulons in Rick and Morty.
Show me what you got!
But another card you can search for with Card of the Soul is the artifact Lancia. It has 2,300 defense and 1,700 attack. 17 plus 23 is 40. And the fact that we can technically search Lancia with a card that we'd normally search basically our starter with is pretty nice. Of course, this is an Orcust format. Being able to use Lancia against Orcust makes our turn 1 better, because DDD, spoiler warning, is not very good going first. It's mainly a going second deck. But what we're trying to do, regardless of if we're going first or second, is we're mainly trying to summon rank 8 monsters. Of course, we use our skill to set up a 10 scale and a low scale. Of course, 10 scale because Savant Kepler is our 10 scale. But we can also set it as a monster from our field to our pendulum scale using the skill after using its normal summon effect. That if normal or special summoned, you can activate one of these effects, target a DD card you control, return it to the hand. That will never happen. Or add a Dark Contract card from deck to hand. What's great about that is you can use Savant Kepler to search for Dark Contract with the Gate or Dark Contract with a Swamp King. Normally we're going to search for Dark Contract with the Gate. It is a continuous spell that during your main phase, you can add a DD monster from deck to hand, and you can only use this effect of this card's name once per turn, and once per turn during your standby phase, take 1,000 damage. We got the Kepler and the Gate to search for what we want. Of course, we're not always going to have the Doom King, right? So it'll be nice to search for it with the Gate and search for the Gate with the Kepler. But of course, if we already have everything we need to search for, then of course we can search for Dark Contract with the Swamp King, another continuous spell that during your main phase, you can fusion summon a fiend type fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion materials, and you can only use it once per turn. And if you're summoning a DD fusion this way, you can also banish monsters from your grave as fusion material, and once per turn during your standby phase take 1000 damage. We can use this as an extension piece if all of our DDs in the grave to summon one of our 2 fusions that I'll get into later. A card that'll help us to go second even better is DD Swirl Slime. Of course, it is limited to 3, and Kepler is also limited to 3, so unfortunately we can only play 1 Swirl Slime, because its effect is if this card is in your hand, you can fusion summon a DDD fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand as fusion materials, including this card. Do keep in mind that there is a difference between a DD and a DDD. All DDDs count as DDs, but all DDs are not DDDs because they do not have that third D.
These nuts. Got him!
So if you wanted to summon DDD Flame King High Genghis or DDD Dragonbane King Beowulf, you're going to need one of your high level ones for the Flame King, and you're going to need a triple D for your Dragonbane King Beowulf. The main one that we want to go into is DDD Flame High King Genghis. It requires a level 5 or higher DD and a regular DD, so Swirl Slime and any of your high level DDs. And if another DD is normal or special summoned to your field while you control this monster, you can target a DD monster in your graveyard, special summon it. That's fantastic, especially because we're going to be summoning it using DD Swirl Slime, because it also has the grave effect that you can banish this card from your grave, special summon a DD monster from your hand. So imagine you fuse using Swirl Slime and one of your DDs, then you use Swirl Slime to summon another DD from your hand, which will trigger the effect of Genghis to summon the DD, the other DD that you used for fusion material, and now you got 3 monsters on the field. But that's not all it does. Flame King High Genghis can also, during your turn, negate a spell trap. Of course, it is annoying that we can't negate a spell trap during the opponent's turn, only during our turn. However, it does make it a lot easier to break the opponent's board if they can't use one of their back row against us. The other fusion we might go into is DDD Dragonbane King Beowulf. This is often just going to be an extension piece using the Dark Contract with a Swamp King, but its effects are pretty good. It requires a DDD and a DD, and if a DD monster, including itself, right, you control attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent, and once per turn during your standby phase you can destroy all cards in the spell trap zones. If your opponent's got a lot of back row and you summon this last turn, goodbye to their back row, and then you can easily go for game. And also the fact that it pierces makes it a lot harder for them to survive. Of course, this is a level 8, and as is Flame King Genghis, and this is a rank 8 deck at the end of the day. In order to support that, we do have another level 8 in our main deck, DDD Oblivion King Abyss Ragnarok. This is the toughest guy in the deck. Look at his art and tell me he's not the main boss monster. The floating head over here, they want us to believe that he's the boss monster, he's the one with an animation, but bro, Ragnarok is the boss monster. Look at his menacing face and how comfortable he looks in that chair. Its monster effect is that if this card is normal or special summoned, you can target a DDD monster in your graveyard, special summon it. That's fantastic. You can only use this effect of DDD Oblivion King Abyss Ragnarok once per turn. Once per turn you can tribute another DD monster, then target a monster your opponent controls and banish it. So, double duty here. On summon, you can summon one from grave, tribute another one of your DDs to banish your opponent's card. Banishing is super relevant in this format that has Dingirsu in it that can protect things from destruction. And the other level 8 we have in the main deck is DD7 Thomas. We're going to search for this anytime that we have just a cracked broken hand. And we search for this, make it even better. Its monster effect is that you can target a DD card in your pendulum zone, destroy that card. And if you do, special summon a level 8 DDD monster from your deck in defense position, but for the rest of the turn its effects, if any, are negated, and any battle damage your opponent takes becomes halved. We can very easily put a lot of damage on the field, so the fact that damage is halved isn't that big of a deal. Thomas just makes it a lot easier for us to make a rank 8. I should mention that Oblivion King Abyss Ragnarok actually keeps going. Its pendulum effect is that if you special summon a DD monster except during the damage step, you can target a DD monster in your grave, any battle damage your opponent takes becomes half, just like the Thomas, but it doesn't stack. Also special summon that monster, and if you do, take 500 damage. So we got a lot of ways to summon level 8s. And if we play our cards correctly, it's going to be very difficult for the opponent to interrupt us, because if they keep removing things, we can still keep summoning level 8s as long as we're doing things correctly. And this deck is kind of difficult to do things correctly with. Oftentimes you might have a replay where you won, but you can look back and see, well damn, even though I won, I could have done something different. I could have done something better. We do actually have to do our pendulum summoning, right? So of course, the Kepler is our scale 10. That's always what we're going to be setting in our scales. And technically speaking, we could set any other scale because we're only pendulum summoning level 8s anyway. Any scale from scale 7 to 1 will do the trick. All of our other scales just so happen to be 7 or lower. But of course, for simplicity, I'll use my scale 1. I could also search for Orthros using Dark Contract with the Gate if I want to. You can use my scale 1 Savant Galilei. I don't really give a damn about its effects, to be real. I only care that it is a high level DD that is also a scale 1. So I could use it alongside the Swirl Slime to go into Flame King High Genghis, but all the other scales work too. It's just that the other scales, I kind of want to use their scale effects, and I don't feel bad about negating Galilei because I don't care about its scale effects. A scale that we could search for profitably is DD Orthros. As a pendulum, you can target a spell trap card on the field and another DD or Dark Contract card you control and destroy them. It's nice little back row removal. DD Savant Thomas is also technically something you could search as a scale. During your main phase, you can add a face-up DD pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand. If you got 2 or more pendulums in your extra deck face up, it's going to make it easier to pendulum summon more of them if you add one of them to your hand. But exactly what are these rank 8s that we're going to be going into? Well, of course, we do have the Galaxy Eyes package where we can rank 8 into Galaxy Eyes Cypher Dragon, maybe not use its effect to steal your opponent's monster. You might not want to do that because you can't attack directly for the rest of the turn except with this Cypher Dragon, but you could decide not to activate that and then just slap a Galaxy Eyes Full Armor Photon Dragon on top of it, detach a material, pop a face up, then slap a Galaxy Eyes Cypher Blade Dragon on top of that one, detach a material, destroy any card, and for the cost of 1 rank 8 you destroy 2 cards, or you stole a card and destroyed 2 cards. Also, if you have 3 level 8s on the field, you could summon Coach Ging Giant Trainer, which requires 3 level 8s, and you can detach an Xyz material from this card, draw a card and show it, then if it was a monster, inflict 400 to your opponent. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this effect, so of course you'd be doing this going first, and this is not a once per turn. You can do it all 3 times, so you can draw 3 cards and burn your opponent for up to 1200 damage, and potentially you might even draw into your Artifact Lancia to interrupt your Orchist opponent. Speaking of Orchist, we also have Dingirsu, the Orchist of the Evening Star. We all know what Dingirsu does. He protects your whole field, and of course on summon he could send a card your opponent controls to the graveyard non-targeting, so it's also pretty good for going second. And then the last rank 8 that we have in here is number 68, Xanathon the Sky Prison. It requires 2 level 8s, gains 100 attack and defense for each monster in the graveyards, and once per turn, Ignition, you can attach 1 material from this card until the end of your opponent's next turn. This card cannot be destroyed by card effects. Also, neither player can special summon from the graveyards. If you feel like your opponent is playing a deck that special summons from the graveyard a decent amount, then you could summon this, activate it right away because it's not a quick effect, and then basically have an Abyss Dweller-ish effect until your next turn. The deck is fairly simple in concept, but in execution it is a bit more difficult. So let's just get into the game plan tutorial, shall we? So what you're going to want to see in your hand, regardless of if you're going first or second, is either Doom King Armageddon himself or some way to access him. And of course, if you have that access, then the next thing you're going to want to look for is some way to get other level 8s on the field. And one of the best ones is DD Swirl Slime, because of course it can negate your opponent's back row. There are going to be some cases where you're going to forego the Pendulum Summon just to get that back row negate, because technically you can win without Pendulum Summoning in this deck. I'm going to show you in this game plan tutorial how to win without Pendulum Summoning, and then in the next one I'll show you how to win while Pendulum Summoning. So just to show you what different options you can potentially have. So I'm going to activate the Dark Contract with the Gate here, activate its effect, search for DD Swirl Slime. I can activate the DD Swirl Slime here, and another of my level 5 or higher DDDs. In this one I will pitch the Oblivion King Abyss Ragnarok, summon this DDD Flame King High Genghis. So if the opponent wants to activate back row, then great, I'll just negate it. Then I can use the Grave effect of DD Swirl Slime to special summon a DD from the hand. And I'll special summon the Kepler just for learning purposes, and then that will trigger the Flame King High Genghis effect to summon the Ragnarok from grave. And of course I'll also use the Kepler to search for something pretty cool. I'll search for the Contract with the Swamp King, might as well, right? Summon my Oblivion King, and my opponent still can't activate his back row because I have the Genghis, right? And I can use my Ragnarok you know, not having to worry about that back row to potentially banish the opponent's monster. In this situation, I also happen to have the Dark Contract with the Swamp King. You know, maybe I have more to do. Maybe I got more DDs in hand. Fusion Summon Dragonbane. Potentially pierce into the opponent and go for game that way without even Pendulum Summoning. In order to activate this skill profitably to get your pendulum scales, you're not just going to need a Doom King Armageddon, you're also going to need another way to get one of your scales, because of course it only gets one from the deck and the other one comes from the field, or you can just activate run from the hand. So I'll activate the skill here, right, put Armageddon in the extra deck and put a scale from my deck into the pendulum scale, but I have to look at my hand to consider what should I choose. So I've got a couple of low scales. Well, I mean, they're high scales, but in this deck they are low scales because they're only pendulum summoning level 8s. So of course I'll put a high scale. We only really got one high scale in the deck, that being a Kepler, and of course if I had Kepler in my hand, I'd normal summon it, use its effect, then set it as the scale, and then another from my deck. It's great that I happen to have a DD7 Thomas, because its effect makes it a lot easier to go into rank 8s. So I'm going to activate the 7 Kepler here, pendulum summon, and then what we can do here is kind of optional. So I can use the Savant Thomas right away, pop one of my scales to summon another DDD from the deck so I can go into a rank 8 play. However, if I do this, you do have to keep in mind that I might not be lucky enough to draw into another scale so I can pendulum summon next turn. But so we don't have to worry about those odds that much, I'm going to pop the low scale, special summon an Armageddon from the deck, then use all 3 of my monsters to go into a Coach King Giant Trainer. You're not always going to be able to do this, but the Thomas makes it pretty easy to do this. And then you can use its effect 3 times to draw 3 cards, and if they're all monsters, you know, inflict 400 to your opponent for each one. So I'm just going to do that real quick. So of course I drew 3 cards, right? So basically replacing the materials that I used. And from here, you know, I just so happened to get some searchers. That's actually pretty nice for me because I could use the Dark Contract with the gate if I liked, search for something else. Of course, you know, this isn't a hard and fast combo deck, right? This is something that you're going to have to figure out game by game and using your experience. I'm going to search for a Swell Slime here. It is a fantastic card, right? I'm not going to be able to use it this turn, but I could use it next turn, hypothetically. I could normal summon the Kepler, search for another continuous spell, and if you're fusion summoning going first, maybe you go into a Genghis to help you resummon things from the grave. But you could also just go into a Dragon King so that on your standby phase you can destroy all their back row and easily go for game. On my next turn, the gate will be able to search my other scale, which is pretty nice. I also have drawn into the Lancia. I mean, I already had a Lancia in hand, but I did draw into a Lancia. So if the opponent happens to be playing a deck like Orchist or Heroes or anything that banishes, then the Lancia will be able to turn them off, which is pretty awesome. To be able to get a hand that is capable of both pendulum summoning and fusion summoning, and in that case you're going to be comboing off, and the decisions you're going to have to make are often going to be depending on the hand that you have, and sometimes those decisions can be difficult to make, and sometimes the decisions you make aren't going to be optimal, but you can still win if you don't make the optimal decision. That's kind of what is so frustrating to some players about DDDs if the DDD player goes second, because they can keep going and it's going to be difficult to interrupt them even if they're misplaying. But if they're not misplaying, wow, even worse. So I do already have the DDD Doom King Armageddon here, and technically a low scale, so I can just activate the skill right, set a high scale to my field, and activate the low scale right. And I can use the Dark Contract with the gate to search my Swell Slime. I can use the Card of the Soul as well to search for another DDD. I can then use my Swell Slime here, summon DDD Flame King High Genghis. Although I will say, if your opponent has a back row, you should probably do this fusion play before setting up your scales to potentially turn off your opponent's MST or Cosmic. So maybe don't do how I did it, maybe fusion summon before going for your pendulum scales. So I'm going to use these 2 as fusion material, doesn't really matter which ones, right? And then if you happen to have a Ragnarok, you can also basically pay 500 life points to revive one of your DDDs. Freaking amazing, right? And you might use this, you might not use it. It's all going to depend on what you have. You're going to have to make these decisions as you're playing. You want to figure out during your combo whether it would be better to use your Flame King revive or your Ragnarok revive. I'm just going to go for it here, right? Resummon the Doom King. I could use the Genghis right now. I really could use the Genghis right now to revive Swell Slime. Question is though, why would I do that? What exactly is that going to benefit me? If I had used The Ragnarok is material. Maybe that would have been nice. That might have been nice because I might have been able to revive the Ragnarok with the Ragnarok in the scale, revive the Swell Slime, then use the Ragnarok to tribute the Swell Slime, then use Swell Slime's Grave Effect to special summon Armageddon from my hand. So maybe this is a misplay on my end, but it's all learning at the end of the day. I'm not going to use that High King Genghis right now. I can use the Swell Slime though, special summon my Ragnarok, and you know, I did summon the Genghis to the extra monster zone. You might notice, right, that that's actually going to hurt our pendulum summon here. We're not going to be able to pendulum summon because we don't have anything in hand, and we do have something in the extra deck to pendulum summon, but our extra monster zone is taken up. That's also something you're going to have to take into consideration. And it would be okay if, hypothetically, and this is why I'm doing it, you could go into a rank 8 using that Genghis, and you'd only really want to do that, generally speaking, if you felt like the back row wasn't going to be as important, or you feel like you can play through that back row regardless. But you might summon the Genghis in the extra monster zone anyway, so you can get more special summons to your main monster zones, right? These are all little micro decisions that the DDD deck gives you when you're playing going second. The amount of decisions that you have makes this very versatile going second. For the sake of simplicity though, I'm just going to go into a rank 8 using that Genghis. I'm going to go into Galaxy Eye Cypher Dragon using these two monsters, summon it in the main monster zone so that I can pendulum summon out my Armageddon. And there I can make yet another rank 8. Of course, the going second capabilities of this deck are nearly endless, to be real with you. And if you have a Thomas, even more. It just keeps going. And you can play through things very well, and your options with how you can break the opponent's board are really nice. So I definitely recommend practicing the hell out of this deck to make sure you're always doing the optimal thing at the right time. But to be real, you might win going second regardless of if you do it right or not. So there's a couple other things I do have to mention before getting into the replays that you do have to remember when you're playing this deck. If you use Thomas's monster effect or Oblivion King Abyss Ragnarok's scale effect, you are going to be doing half damage, so you're going to have to keep that in mind before attacking for game. You might miss lethal if you use one of these effects and you accidentally exceed when you didn't have to. Maybe you could have just left those monsters on the field and had lethal. Of course, if you feel like you still need to go into those exceeds, there is the option to just not use the monster effect of Thomas or the scale effect of Ragnarok. All these options are here. You just got to keep these things in mind. I also need to point out that this deck is historically and currently not very good at going first, at least this version of the deck. There have been versions of DD in the past that were quite good going first. However, those versions are pretty much unplayable with the fact that we can only play one Swirl Slime. So this is kind of the way we have to play DDs these days. But the fact that we do have Lancia makes the deck fantastic against Orchist. We could potentially draw into it with a Coach King Giant Trainer going first. We could also potentially go into a Dingirsu going first to protect us from destruction. So the deck is better at going first now. It's not amazing. It's not like Onomats or Phantom Knights. It doesn't really do much going first, to be real with you. But going second, it probably is the best going second deck in the game as far as I'm aware. But you know, it's all well and good telling you what to do, how to do it, but it's much better to see some real gameplay in action. So let's just get into the replay, shall we? So my opponent happens to be going first here, and they are playing Gandora Orchist. So they're going to be setting up a full Orchist field, as well as setting up the follow-up for their Gandora stuff. So, yep, going off, doing their standard Gandora Orchist plays, going into the Galatea, you know, using their Nightmare, and then searching for their orchestrated release as well. Then they can go into their Dingirsu, have a protective field, and if they want to interrupt us at any time, all they need to do is tribute both of their monsters and, you know, remove our card. I happen to have a Swell Slime in my hand though. If I didn't have the Swell Slime, I definitely would have searched for it with a Dark Contract with a Gate. But what I'm going to do here is use the Swell Slime and my Armageddon to go right into DDD Flame King High Genghis. That means if he wants to use his release, he can't do it, and because he knows what Genghis does, he just doesn't activate the release. That's exactly the effect that this deck has going second. Of course, you can negate a back row, but the back row often won't be negated because they know it can be negated, so they'll just not activate it, right? So then we can use the Contract with a Gate, of course, search for our Ragnarok here, then we can use the Swell Slime, special summon our Ragnarok. That'll trigger the Genghis. We'll also ask for our Ragnarok is on summon. its on summon effect to resummon this guy. However, we're already resummoning it with a Genghis, so I don't use it. Maybe it's bounced to the hand and we pendulum summon it, right? Hypothetically. So there's really no point in activating it when it's just going to be resummoning the same monster. Anyway, going to tribute it with the I'm sorry. So I'll use my Ragnarok, right, to tribute the Armageddon to banish his Dingirsu. Then I can pendulum summon. Then I can rank 8 into Galaxy Eyes, rank up into Photon, pop his monster, and then go for game. And yeah, he scoops it up, even though I was about to literally attack for game anyway. I actually happen to be going first here. I've got the Dark Contract, searches for my Armageddon, then I can use the skill, right, to put the Armageddon there, activate a scale, activate the other scale from my hand, and pendulum summon 1. So sometimes it's going to be like this. Sometimes all you can do is summon the Armageddon, but I do have the Lancia. If I had a better hand, maybe I could have gone into Coach to potentially draw into that Lancia, but I can see that my opponent is playing Jaden, which of course means that he's playing heroes, right? And Lancia is fantastic against heroes. So he's going to summon any hero, then he's going to Super Poly. Must be nice to already have the Super Poly, right? So he's going to go into his Escuriado. Then he's going to, draw 2, discard 1. Ironic that he discards a Lancia, right? Then he's going to activate Miracle Fusion. We're going to chain Lancia. So not only can't he use it, but he loses that Miracle Fusion from his hand, so he can't use it next turn. So he attacks into me, but it's not lethal. And I got the follow-up play. So I can search with a Dark Contract, and my scales are going to be negated, so that I can't, I can still pendulum summon, right? Then the Swirl Slime, special summon my Genghis, and I don't have anything in hand, so I can't use the Swirl Slime engrave, right? But I can pendulum summon, which will trigger the Genghis, resummon the Ragnarok. Ragnarok will tribute the Genghis. Then I can activate the Swamp King, fantastic for me. Then I can banish 2 from grave, summon the Beowulf, and I have overwhelming lethal. So I'm going second here against the Block Dragon deck. This guy has got Amano Awado, and he's used the skill Smile World to prevent his Amano Awado from going back to his hand. And I have a handful of pendulums. So what's going to happen here? I'm going to use the command of the Doom King, get my 2 scales on the field, and I happen to have a contract, so I can use the contract, search another DDD, and I don't actually have to activate any monster effects. I can just pendulum summon 4 big buff Chunguses and just go in for game. Show me what you got. Might not be that good going second, however, it does have Lancia now. I could draw into the Lancia with a Giant Trainer. It also has the Dingirsu to potentially protect us, but the deck is absolutely amazing going second, and nobody can deny that. But you guys, let me know how you guys feel about DDD in the comments. If you got any questions about how the deck runs, let me know and we can talk about it. But yeah, if you like the video, subscribe if you're new around here, hit that bell to get notified every time we make a new video. And I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Wait, hey, I feel like the greatest. Now I feel like they hate it. Now I feel like the only one and there is no debating. Man, I feel like they leaving. Now I feel like they waited. Now I feel like this is the feeling before I can make it. Before I hit the stage, I just feel like I'm nauseous. Or I feel like I'm popping. Or I feel like a boss is. Maybe I'm feeling off it. Or I feel like I'm toxic. Maybe feeling intoxicated is the reason for all this. I want to whip it with the top down, dog, like I'm Earth Gang. Told him, listen, Wild Day shine like my first name. Told me go and grab a titty boy, it's my first chain. I ain't even switch gears yet, it's the first lane. The first pain I ever felt was the worst pain. And church came, and that feeling of hurt came. And her name made this feeling all worth pain. She made me realize what I had felt in the first place.